but he was an immigrant kid. I don't know if he had docs or not. And one day he just didn't show up to practice, like in the middle of the season. We knocked on his door. Nobody, parents like disappeared, like the whole family had just like closed up shop. Nobody was answering the doors,
God.
whatever.
All right, let's get casting. So we were talking for a few minutes before this thing began. What's on your mind today, man?
Yeah, I was telling you that, and we've talked about it a little bit. I don't remember if we've podcasted about it, but I coach junior high basketball. It's a thankless job, but we had a game yesterday and packed the stands and won 70-8, and so that emotion carried us through to tonight and a 6 a.m. practice this morning, and so I'm running on fumes right now. I feel like.
All right, dragging a little bit.
Just a little
But
bit.
Good victory though.
Yeah.
What a good way to start the season.
The kids were pumped, and it's fun to. I mean, that's the very first game for any of these kids on a school level, and to have the cheerleaders there, there's 30 cheerleaders, and the parents. I mean, they literally didn't have a seat in the house. So
That's awesome.
for these kids, it was awesome.
Do you wish it was a little tighter as far as the score goes?
Yeah, I mean, I hope that's not consistent throughout the season. I told the kids that when we scrimmage might be the best competition they get all year. I hope that's not the case, but I've got a really good group that, a bunch of them I've brought over from some of my club teams and whatever else. And so
For you guys are pretty.
they've played together a lot, and the kids that we added are kids they've played against a lot, and it's fun to see them all come together and play. But yeah, we're going to be good, and so hopefully
I love
that's
it.
a good team.
So, the captain of the Westover law firm coaches, and we were talking about a memory I had, which was growing up way back when. I'm a little bit older than Mr. Westover there. Coach Westover. Sorry,
shoot.
Coach.
We're gonna get
Sorry,
formal
Coach.
today.
Yeah. But they peppered us with all sorts of, by they, I mean Hollywood went through a Vietnam phase. In Vietnam phase, you had Platoon, you had Hamburger Hill, you had Full Metal Jacket, you had even Top Gun. You had a lot of military type stuff going on in the mid to late 80s. And probably shouldn't have watched it, but it popped up on YouTube, and I get a little nostalgic there, or nostalgia kicked in, and I saw the drill sergeant. And my favorite one of that run of movies, not to leave Rambo out or any of the others. I mean, there's plenty to go around here. But Full Metal Jacket, that drill sergeant was something else. And he had this way of really picking on everybody equally, but he made a really good note to pick on the heavyset kid that couldn't do a pull-up, that seemed to be kind of a mess up. And this is the Marines, and you're going to be getting shot at before long. And so he finds in an inspection of their things, he finds a jelly donut and Private Pyle was his name. He called him Gomer Pyle. And so the whole entire squad had to do push-ups while he ate the jelly donut. And you were telling me that, yeah, you do something similar.
Yeah, no, yeah. We try and make sure the whole team's accountable for everybody, and so that means like for us, we at the end of practice pick one kid. Sometimes it's our best free throw shooter, sometimes it's our worst free throw shooter, and we put him on the line. We have everyone surround him, and if the kid misses, the whole team runs. If the kid makes it, they get to celebrate and be done with practice. And sometimes that goes 5 or 6 shooters deep, and they get tired. But yeah, the whole team's accountable for that kid's free throw, and that helps for both the pressure side of that kid shooting a free throw, but also the team knowing that they can cheer on their guy when they make it and succeed, and also they suffer along with it when they.
Yeah, so that makes perfect sense to me. And you let a bunch of moms into your practice, you might get a little bit of
closed practices for sure.
Yeah, might get a little bit of kickback on that a little. But yeah, somebody jumps off sides, the whole team's penalized. So you make an error at shortstop, and the next guy hits a dinger.
So maybe this is my upbringing that makes me do this, but it just reminded me of a story. So I played pretty high level, and when I was a captain on my high school varsity team, I had a kid, and this brings in the immigration side of things. That we had a kid, and I won't name his name. I don't even remember if I remember it, but he was an immigrant kid. I don't know if he had docs or not. And one day he just didn't show up to practice, like in the middle of the season. So my coach was like, "You're the captain. You figure this out." So to the point where we knocked on his door, nobody, parents like disappeared, like the whole family had just like closed up shop. Nobody was answering the doors, whatever. So the next day, it was like, "Oh, did you find him?" Well, no, coach, we didn't find him. We even knocked on his. No, actually, the first day was we called him. Coach said, "Okay, you're running, just the captains, because you got to keep track of your teams." I'm going, I don't even know where the kid is. Not my responsibility. But I ran. Next day, he's like, "You find him." Then that's the night we knocked on the door. Next day, came back. You're running again. To the point that finally the coach realized that we really had no control. But he, as captains, he was going to make us responsible for a kid that wasn't showing up to practice. And so it was a hard lesson for me because I didn't quite, as a 15-year-old, 16-year-old, understand why it was my responsibility why a kid wasn't showing up for practice. But he was trying to, hey, if you're going to be a leader, you got to keep track of your team.
Yeah, so. It is what it is. And I believe in those principles. I think that is something our society somewhat lacks. Well, I got some on my mind, and it's been haunting me since last week. We were talking. And we talked about the process of immigration and if we can just get over the fact that they're here illegally and try to deal with
what's
already here. I understand that outlook. I do. You and I feel like we're a little bit, let's say we're exposed to the reality and the human side of it.
Absolutely.
We're staring this individual across the border illegally and their family and their future and their hopes and their dreams. We're staring at their eyes. And
we get less the political, we get political side of things, but we also get the personal side of things. Right. And a lot of people that look at it politically aren't going to get.
Right. And so, and I made a comment and you jumped on it, and I appreciated the candor. And I appreciated the fact that I understand that's one outlook. One way of looking at it is to keep them inexpensive, yada, yada, yada. But let's push that aside if we can just get over just the fact that they're here illegally. So I want to drill down on that.
Okay.
I've been thinking for a few days what kind of thought experiment we could do that would kind of bring the listeners into these folks crossing the border illegally, knowingly crossing the border illegally, and then trying to procure work here and trying eventually to get documentation. It seems like that seems to be the natural flow of things. Sometimes they do try to get documentation. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they're not interested in that. They're just here to work.
Right.
Okay. All right. And so I racking my brain. The best thing I could come up with, and I wanted to talk to you about this openly. I don't have a good comparison here. Les Mis, dude gets tossed in the prison for stealing
petty crime.
Yeah, petty crime. Stealing
for his family to survive.
Yeah. Sure. So putting ourselves in the shoes of a very poor individual in a third world country that we share a border with, that's the best example I could come up with. Is they're trying to do whatever it takes to better their lot in life, and if that includes, jumping over a fence and finding work on a farm or on a construction site or wherever, they're going to do it, and they've been doing it for years and years and years. So we have that. It's kind of been done 1,016 times and counting this month. It's kind of been done. So I have a lot of family there that's doing it. So it's kind of a cultural thing as well. But for the viewer, if somebody average Latino born in Mexico, which we deal with a lot here in Arizona,
sure.
Average individual there, what would it take for them to come here legally, and how many tickets are available yearly? Let's start there.
Yeah, and that's where it gets hard, and that's where if we call it decentivized or taken the motivation away from Mexicans or anybody to do this legally, it's because of that question you just asked. And what I mean by that is that we have what we call a visa bulletin. So what that means is we have a cap, we have a limit on the number of visas, whether it be employment-based or whether it be family-based, that we allow to come into the United States, and it's capped extremely low considering what our population is, what our population growth is, and that cap was set decades ago. Right. So it has not changed in order to accommodate labor force and the need and what we got going with our economy. And if anybody was realistically honest with how we've set up U.S. society, or to be honest with you, if you historically look back at any dominating cultural society, it's always dependent on some sort of labor class.
Right.
We hope it's not slave class. That's not what we're in, but a labor class. And for us right now, it's the immigrant labor force. It's not indentured servitude. They're willing to take these wages and they're willing to take these jobs where we won't. But we've set ourselves up for that. So
let's stay on that for a minute. Let's stay on that because there'll be some pushback out there saying, "Oh no, they're taking jobs from us. They're taking American jobs. They're taking American jobs." And I vehemently think that's BS.
On the intimate level, and I understand the argument. I think that's where you and I get a perspective that may be a little bit more intimate on the personal side of things. And that doesn't just go from the immigrant side of things. I'm not just saying that immigrants come to me and say, hey, people are offering me jobs. I'm talking about companies, multi-billion-dollar companies that would love to hire U.S. citizens,
right,
that literally can't get people to do the jobs. They don't. I had one guy come in and say, look, I hire somebody. It's a U.S. citizen. He can't pass a drug test, or he lasts 2 days because I'm drilling wells, and it's hard work. It's 3 a.m., and it's 12-hour days. And in order for us to break even, we got to have people that are willing to do this work. And I get somebody here, it's 3 days, and they're gone. But I get this Mexican immigrant guy that wants to work, and he's my best employee. And that's not my preference, but that's kind of the reality.
And they're spending time, money, and effort by them, meaning the employers, are spending time, money, and effort to get these guys documents any way they can get.
Yeah, and the reason they're talking to me in the first place is, hey, I either want to bring over people legally or I want to try and legalize this guy I've found that's such a hard worker for me because I've had zero success. And in order to do that, that's another thing people don't understand. In order to do it legally, I've got to go through this entire process where I advertise the job, I recruit for the job, I do everything that I can to get a U.S. citizen to work. And then once we get past that, and I do hundreds of these, and so you can tell the success rate that we're having in recruitment, right, where once we get zero applicants, then we go and say, hey, we need to identify, Juan, or whether it be some guy from India or whoever it is.
Sure.
We've already gone through a 1.5 year long recruitment process, and we've gone through a process of making sure we're not undercutting the market as far as wages go. The government tells us what we have to pay them as a minimum. Yeah. So that this process is set forth. But going back to the original question, problem is we're capped out at numerical limits. And to give you and it's not even an extreme example. I wish I could say this is extreme, but let's say you're petitioning your adult child, you're a U.S. citizen parent, and you're petitioning your adult child for whatever reason. You had one child born in Mexico and you brought the rest here. They were all born here, and you got one, lone child. This happens all the time that didn't get documents. That child, once they turn 21 years old, has a wait time of more than 30 years.
Today.
So they're working on applications in 1998.
Their entire family is here, has been here, and is here legally.
Correct.
All the siblings, most likely the parents, and that child that was born in Mexico is
a 30-year wait. And so realistically, we have not motivated that person to want to stay in Mexico and do it legally.
Right.
They want to be connected with their family. And so, I wouldn't say that's 90%, but it's a good percentage of people that are coming over illegally to the United States just for the simple fact that they can't wait or are not motivated enough to wait to join their family for 30 years, 3 decades.
So,
and that's on just one category. There's other examples.
All right, to heck with Les Mis. This is more like a high school girl that, no, I don't want you to come over tonight type thing. That's our immigration program.
A little bit. I mean, yeah, in the sense that, like, what when you have that type of cap, when you have that numerical limit, that prevents somebody from knowing that they've at least got a chance in their lifetime. I mean, 30 years is such a long time.
Long time. Reagan some years ago wanted, he had the agricultural.
The SAW program, yep.
And that was a pretty decent start. I feel like Bush Sr. kind of...
Reagan actually did the only amnesty program that we've seen in the last 100 years. It's funny, our two biggest immigration reforms, Bush, Reagan, both Republican presidents.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So it's not always politically one side or the other.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, Reagan's program was not only the agricultural worker program, but that agricultural worker program also coincided with an amnesty program in 1986 that if you had been here for a certain amount of time, you could apply for, but you had to prove that you were here from at least 86.
Right. So, and a lot of folks benefited from those programs.
Sure.
We meet them all the time.
And everybody's so afraid of the amnesty word, and I'm not necessarily, purporting that we need an amnesty program, but I don't, and maybe somebody could tell me that I'm wrong, but I don't hear a lot of complaints about all these people from the 86 amnesty program are taking our jobs and whatever else.
We've never heard that. That's an interesting one. I guess you could search it out, but I don't think you're going to hear that. And so you have those that are here and that have been here for a long period of time that don't like the porous border that we have currently, because it just seems to make what you were saying last week. It seems to make that line longer. And
my biggest concern, if we're talking politically about immigration, is that I think there's two different issues. I think there's definitely a need for border security, and it needs to tighten up. And we don't want to encourage. I had somebody in my office yesterday saying, "Hey, I want to apply. My family's asking me about applying for an asylum program," and I'm like, "Okay, do you know what the asylum program is? Walk me through it," because I wanted them to tell me what they're hearing in the news and whatever else. And they come from an area of town that's been designated as a bad area, and so they can get asylum. I'm like, no, there's 0 areas that have been designated in the world that are asylum guaranteed cases. And I had to walk them through what the requirements there, and they're going, oh, that is not what we thought. And what we're unfortunately creating right now is this news cycle or whatever we're doing where the border's open and people think, their family members are telling them, hey, my friend went up and he got asylum at the border. That doesn't exist. You don't get asylum.
Right.
You are allowed into the country to fight an asylum claim. But these people under their perceptions are thinking that we are just giving out asylum right now. So there is a problem at the border. I believe completely a problem. We've screwed it up and we need to fix it. What I struggle with sometimes on the political side of things is we've got a group of 11 million people or more that have been here for decades that have not been documented. We tried to do it a little bit with DACA, but they're not going anywhere. These are not the people that have come for 6 months to work and send back money to Mexico. They're ingrained, they're assimilated, they have kids here, whatever. They're literally not going anywhere. Now we can try and round them up and find some of them. But logistically, I don't know how that even happens unless we become a police state. Yeah, I know Arpaio quickly went to jail on it. Right. So we've got all these people here, and we're doing little to try and solve the fact that these people are working already, and we need to bring them out of the shadows, in my opinion, and provide whatever that program is. And like I said, it doesn't need to be a full-blown amnesty program. But even if it's a temporary worker program like Reagan did with the Agricultural Society, or even the DACA kids are not permanently residing here in the United States, it's a temporary program. But to be able to fingerprint people, know who they are, have them pay taxes and all that, you bring them out. They're here, and none of these people that I know are wanting to stay in the shadows. They have to stay in the shadows because that's the way we've set it up. Right. But none of them that I know want to be in the shadows.
Me neither.
So I don't know. They're going to contribute. All these arguments of drain on social services and whatever else. To me, it's the simple fact that you are forcing a group into the shadows that then has to choose to do those, has to choose to be a drain on social services because they can't get insurance. So then they have to go to the emergency room, and then they get a $40,000 bill because they don't have insurance, and then they're in this cycle of where they're draining. And absolutely true. But, a simple fact of giving them a social security number so they can get in private insurance and pay towards it, then it's their problem.
And they would do it. And that's what I think most. So I think, all right, Joe voter, Susie voter, historically has been the fear politically, and this is just my opinion here, that I can't back amnesty. I can't back an illegal move.
Yeah, buzzwords, right?
Right. I can't back that. But I think that Joe and Susie now, the voters now, are ready to face truth. You kind of put it last week, if we can get over this part, we can deal with this part. Okay, I feel like you hit it. It's just been eating at me to where I wanted to explain it a little bit more. Here's why we've got this line the size of Texas, no pun intended. We've got this line, and here's why we have it. Here's why we have this problem. It's a problem that America has faced never, really.
Yeah.
Because we're a country of immigrants. And so we've really never figured out our border policy.
Yeah.
The framers of the Constitution were fantastic, but they figured that future politicians would start figuring out border policies.
And they're, as the founding fathers, in their perspective, we were the lighthouse on the hill, and so they wanted people coming here. I mean, it was come freely.
Yep. At that time,
bring your downtrodden, bring whatever. And at that time, there was that thought wasn't crossing their minds, because at that time, the more people, the more melting pot, the more culturally diverse. With the freedoms that they were trying to purport, that was what they were trying to build.
And now we've got 330 million-ish around there citizens, and we're like, okay, now we kind of we need a border, but we've never tackled that policy of what is our border, what does it look like, and how do we roll this way. Some years ago, in 08, 09, those great years, probably didn't affect you and I as much as the majority of Arizona. I felt terrible. It was awesome the first couple of weeks there was no traffic at all going to Phoenix, hitting court appearances over there. It was great. And then after a few days of that, it's depressing.
This SB 1070, is that what you're talking about?
It's when we hit that depression / recession.
We're talking about the market of crashing housing market.
The housing market crashed. I'm sure your business went down to a degree. My Latino business, certainly to a degree, was less.
Yeah, I had people cancel out contracts because they were just leaving.
They would just go back home. It's easier to be there.
Poor there than poor here.
Poor here, right. And so it just shows that when there's a need, they fill that need. And when there wasn't, they just, they got the hint, they took off. It just wasn't work. And so, it's easier to be poor there than it is here. Well, at some point, our voters and those of us that are wandering around, we need to figure out that, yes, we have a border issue. We have an immigration issue because we've never really tackled it. We've given some attempts. We talked about Reagan. We talked about Bush Sr., I believe it was. Mm-hmm. We talked about those two attempts. But we really haven't just had an honest conversation about we're kind of ridiculous with our immigration policies. They're ridiculous. And we need the political arm of this thing to go, listen, all you all, we've always had a problem with this.
Yeah.
And so this is what we suggest we do. And let's bat the ball around a little bit and come up with something that makes some bloody sense.
It's tough because I think, obviously, politically, and I lean, for an immigration attorney, I lean conservative, maybe moderately conservative because I see the realities of things, especially on the immigration issue. But in general, I'm a conservative, politically leaning person. The problem is we really don't have any moderate thinkers anymore, at least those that are in charge of the political side of things. And so this is there's so many elements to immigration. When you have such right-leaning and such left-leaning people that have to answer to certain small constituencies that keep their budget running and keep their political contributions coming, everybody knows we're in a bad political spot. There hasn't been compromise on many issues at all. And this one is one that has to have people come to the table. It's not one like a budget where you can just threaten until somebody just caves and then we set a budget like we saw with the government shutdown a couple of weeks ago. Immigration just doesn't work that way. There's so many moving parts to it but it needs to be at least there needs to be a table discussion, and even if it's incrementally, we're just ignoring.
Right.
That's what we keep pushing the ball to
And
the
the
next
problem
president,
is
and
we
then
kind of
there's
have
promises and no fulfillment of promises. I mean, Obama's the last one to really put it in. That was the DACA program, which has now been in litigation for almost more than a decade. We're still fighting about it, even though on both sides of the ledger, every poll you'll see, most people are in agreement to just make DACA permanent. But there are certain states that don't want to give it up, Texas being one of them, and we can't even agree on that one. And that was the last one we've had, and that wasn't even permanent. It was just it's a tough issue, and until we figure out a politically way to come
I'm going
together.
to throw out an idea that may or may not be, but I want to see where it lands with you, because I feel like if there was a pay to play, I know that's a terrible way to put it, but these folks are willing to go through certain procedures and to secure themselves even a limited amount of documentation, like a worker's permit or a green card, we call it, or something like that. I feel like, and that's a start. And then if they want to do this, that's okay, the next level. And if they want to do this, next level.
I think the last reform that was proposed, I think it was an 8-year path to a green card. So it was like, you had to prove that you were paying taxes. I think there was even an English requirement as part of it. I mean, it was pretty extensive, and you were going to be working really hard for 8 years to do it. But I tell you that at least 80-90% of the people that I deal with would do that in a heartbeat.
Yeah, they would do it. And so I just feel like, okay, you want to work. All right, here's your number. Here's your this. Here's the price tag to that. Here's the requirements. You got to show proof of work. You got to renew this every 18 months or whatever, every year, whatever. You got to renew this every year. And how much are you going to pay a coyote to bring you on over here? Okay, $3,500, $5,000. That price tag's gone way up. Crazy where they're coming up with that money, but they do. How much are you going to pay a coyote? All right, well, we'll charge you $1,500 to wrap the administration costs and whatnot. And then you get a worker's permit, and that gets you in the system. And if you want to just remain there, you show employment, you remain law-abiding, and you pay your taxes. Okay.
Yeah, and I would maybe even say that I would like that program for the people that are already here.
Right.
For the people that are outside of the country that are not here yet, I say take care of the people that aren't leaving at this point, and find a way for them, because of the way we've set it up, there's certain penalties that exist that if you've crossed that border one time, you just can't legalize yourself unless you've got a spouse, basically.
Right.
So on the worker side of things, we can't help. The company that comes to me and says, hey, I've got this guy and he is by far my best worker, and he pays taxes, I W-2 him, he's an independent contractor, however they've set it up. But man, I would love to keep this guy legal. And I say, okay, how did he enter into the country? Well, just one time, and when he was 15 years old or whatever else. If he's not DACA, I'm like, sorry, you're out of luck. But I think that there's two solutions. Deal with that type of a program for those that are already here. And then I think simply we have programs in place that can bring workers that have to renew them every year. And our problem is that we've capped these numbers 25, 40,000, 65,000
right,
pieces
which is
a year,
which is like spitting in the ocean.
300 million population.
Right.
Those visas literally our H-1B program, for example. These are our bachelor's degrees and whatever else. That's been in a lottery for years, which means that we've got 500,000 applicants for 65,000 visas one time a year. Right. So it is, and it's not, we're not doing it based on merits. So we're not saying, hey, we're picking the best ones out. We're literally throwing everybody in a hat, numerically generating a number and say, hey, you won the lottery this year, and so your company can apply for you. And so that program needs way more visas. The H-2B program's capped out really quickly. They have 2 fiscal years and they go fast. I just had a client lose out on doing that because the timing didn't work out. And yeah, so numerically we just have not kept up with the market conditions politically. And those are easy solutions.
You're saying draw line. You're saying draw line. Those that aren't going to leave. So let's figure out that line.
Yeah, I think, and the program that you're saying, temporary work visas that you have to renew and keep them out, kind of
Bump
like a
up
DACA program.
Right.
That's a great program for those that are already here. And you make a requirement. Hey, you have to have been here for 5 years or 10 years and whatever else, or pay your taxes, whatever. But on the bringing people, I think the asylum program needs to be checked, number one. And then if you're talking about motivating people to come here that we need for foreign workers, then you make it so that they legally can do it. But right now, these companies are afraid to do it because they're going to spend money that they're never going to get a value out of because we have so little numbers of visas that we're giving.
So interesting. It's so interesting. So bottom line is, when it comes to the political hot potato, the bottom line, I'm just going to scrap it at this, I think, is we're all eating the jelly donut. No, the government's sitting there eating the jelly donut, and we're all doing the push-ups.
Doing the race. Yeah, sure.
We're all doing the push-ups.
Yeah, for me, the government's shooting the free throw and everybody else is running.
Yeah.
So
we're just praying like a Dutch uncle. They make one once in a blue moon.
And I don't mean to put this on all of our politicians in the sense that I understand the hard job that it is in trying to come to the table. I'm a political science major. That's what I studied in college. It fascinates me. I've studied historically how societies have been set up, both our own and others. And we're unfortunately at a point where I hope we can come back from it. But we have, and we know this, we've talked about the divide that's happening in the United States. It's getting deeper, and that's not going to help the immigration side. I think it's not going to help a lot of things. We just don't know how to come together as a society and listen to each other like we used to.
Right. Come to the table. Let's figure things out. The opposite of fear is love.
Yeah.
And so I don't know what we're fearing. Let's get to the table. Let's figure it out. Because I think if we could figure that out, the immigration thing, we've done something that's never really been done. It's been attempted, and it's been a little bit better once upon a time, but it's never really been tackled on a
Yeah, we put a Band-Aid on a gushing wound right now. And so these Band-Aids are, I mean, it literally is going to take somebody to take their pride and take their constituency out of it and say, okay, let's bring the important people to the table and let's really talk about the realities of this and what we can do. And it's going to compromise always makes somebody unhappy, right?
Sure.
But I'm okay with that. Yeah. I'm okay with it not being a complete, and I wish everybody else was. But that's the problem. Every time something's been proposed, we sneak in a border wall. Right. Or on the other side, if it's proposed for something good, we sneak in an open border, or we sneak in a liberal asylum program. So everybody's just trying to get their agenda through instead of just
actually doing the
something
surgery.
That's realistic.
Right, doing the surgery. And for somebody, I respect what you just said, because somebody that sees the whites of the eyeballs of those that this would affect personally, day in, day out, and you bleed for these folks. Westover Law Firm bleeds for these folks. Saying not all of them are going to be happy.
Sure.
And yes, we've dealt with heartbreak. We've dealt with not the good side of the story. You know, we haven't had... We've seen a mother of three get deported. I'll never forget. I represented two gals. Exact same witnesses, exact same information came from them that really, really aided law enforcement. It's back in the Arpaio days. Little vitamin shop out of Tempe, and heartbreaking for me just to even show up to work the next day when Nora got deported, and Maria stayed with papers in your hands and went on to be able to continue to care for her family and her husband, and she are now citizens and so on.
Exact same crime.
Exact same everything.
And the crime was basically using fake documents, not even fake documents, but made up documents. Yeah. The difference, just for the people's understanding, is that one entered in with a passport and overstayed it. The other one had entered in illegally, and the laws
and she went
the applicability of those laws are different.
And she was deported swiftly and promptly, and promised that if she, gave her statement, and she did, and put it all on the line.
And it still didn't work out.
And that to me broke my heart. I was very happy for the one, but for the other, that they were identical, other than that little minor.
It was a factual issue, nothing to do with the actual.
One little minor detail. And we have to live with that heartbreak.
Yeah.
Because, that stays with you. How long has that been? That's been 15 years,
I just barely
12,
got
14 years?
the one that actually stayed here, her green card, but it was a process that, probably 10, 11 years.
Yeah, so it's been a minute. And so we see that, but if we can see that and understand that there's going to be some pain, some injustice, something that just doesn't feel right, but the majority of it is functional.
And I want a program. I don't want to pretend like I'm looking for some kind of open program where, all 11 million are going to qualify. That's not what I want, restrictions on not committing certain felonies. And yeah, I think that's logical. And that's, again, this is where when you start introducing some of these, okay, we're going to make a requirement of certain things, then it's like all or nothing is what that political group says. No, I want everybody protected or nothing. And that's just not the reality of it on both sides of things. And I just wish we were a little more grown up right now to handle that.
That's well put. A little more grown up.
Because look, we're both parents.
Yeah.
And I've never punished a kid where I haven't felt bad. Right. It's the worst to go to bed and go, man, I just screamed that kid up and down. But I also know that kid needed to be disciplined, and nobody's going to feel good about it. But in the long run, hopefully, that kid comes back and appreciates it and knows the rules and knows what I expect. And that's, that's the same thing we have to be as adults when we're dealing with political issues. And yeah, I wish immigration wasn't a political issue, because it would be a lot easier for me to not have to deal with the political side of things. But my job literally hangs in the balance of who's in presidency, who's the president of the United States, because it's so executive based. Even though you'd think that it's congressionally and constitutionally set, there's so many memos and executive memorandums and change enforcement that change.
If we just look back at the two that had a pretty decent splash, they were presidents.
Yeah.
Let's be adults.
Yeah.
Let's go out on that one. Let's be adults.
Yeah.
Jesse Westover, Westover Law Firm. Dana Hogel, hit the Arizona Law Firm.